Maya had always been the girl who walked differently. In the small town of Cedar Falls, where everyone knew everyone else's business, being different wasn't easy. She was born with a hip condition that made her left leg shorter than her right, causing her to walk with a noticeable limp. While other kids ran freely across the playground, Maya moved more carefully, more deliberately, but Maya was far from ordinary in other ways. Her mind was sharp as a blade, and she had this incredible ability to remember everything she read. Teachers often said she was the brightest student they'd ever had. While her classmates struggled with math problems, Maya would solve them in her head. When they were assigned book reports, she would finish reading the entire book in one sitting and write essays that made grown-ups stop and think. The town library became her second home, Mrs. Peterson. The old librarian would save the newest books for Maya because she knew the girl would devour them faster than anyone else. Maya especially loved reading about Native American history and culture. She spent hours learning about different tribes, their traditions, and their struggles. Something about their stories of resilience spoke to her heart. High school was tough for Maya in ways that had nothing to do with academics. While she earned perfect grades and impressed every teacher, the social side was a minefield. Kids her age could be cruel without even realizing it. They would imitate her walk behind her back, make jokes about her wobble, and exclude her from activities that required too much walking or running, but Maya refused to let their ignorance define her. She graduated as valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to study Native American studies at the State University. Her graduation speech brought tears to many eyes as she spoke about finding strength in our differences, and how challenges can become our greatest teachers. College opened up a whole new world for Maya. For the first time, she was around people who valued her mind over her physical appearance. She excelled in her studies, writing papers that her professors said were graduate-level work. She learned to speak basic Lakota, studied tribal law, and spent summers volunteering at reservation schools. It was during one of these summer volunteer programs that Maya first met David. He was nothing like the boys she'd known in high school or college. David was 35, 12 years older than her, with calloused hands from years of construction work. His black hair was always slightly messy from wearing hard hats, and his face was weathered from working outdoors. David wasn't much of a talker, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. He had dropped out of school at 16 to help support his younger siblings after their father died in a car accident. While Maya had spent those years in classrooms, David had spent them on construction sites, learning to build houses, fix roofs, and lay foundations. What struck Maya most about David was how he treated her from the very first day they met. He didn't stare at her limp or offer unwanted help. He simply treated her like any other person. When they walked together, he naturally slowed his pace to match hers without making a big deal about it. When she stumbled on uneven ground, he would casually offer his arm as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Their friendship developed slowly over that summer. David would pick Maya up from her volunteer work, and they would drive through the reservation while she shared stories about the history she'd learned, and he showed her places where his family had lived for generations. He taught her things no textbook could: how to identify different plants his grandmother used for medicine, where to find the best spots to watch the sunset, and what it really meant to be part of a community that looked out for each other. Maya found herself looking forward to these drives more than anything else in her day. David had this way of listening that made her feel heard. When she talked about her research, he asked thoughtful questions. When she mentioned struggles from her childhood, he nodded with understanding rather than pity. For the first time in her life, Maya felt completely accepted for who she was. As summer ended and Maya prepared to return to college for her final year, something had shifted between them. What started as friendship had grown into something deeper. David had never known anyone like Maya. Her intelligence amazed him, but it was her kindness and determination that truly captured his heart. Maya had never felt so understood by anyone. They kept in touch through letters and phone calls during her final year of college. David wasn't comfortable with technology, so he wrote old-fashioned letters in his careful handwriting. Maya treasured each one, reading them over and over. In his simple words, She found more poetry than in any book she'd ever read. When Maya graduated with highest honors, David drove 4 hours to attend her graduation ceremony. Seeing him in the crowd, wearing the only suit he owned, made her happier than any academic achievement ever had. That night, over a quiet dinner at a small restaurant, David asked Maya to move back to the reservation, not just to visit, but to stay, to build a life with him. The proposal wasn't fancy. There was no ring, no grand romantic gesture. David simply took her hands across the table and said, "Maya, I love you for who you are. I want to spend my life with you, if you'll have me." His honesty and sincerity moved her to tears. Maya said yes without hesitation. She had found something in David that she'd never found anywhere else: complete acceptance and genuine love. It didn't matter that their backgrounds were different, that their education levels didn't match, or that people might not understand their connection. What mattered was how they made each other feel. Moving to the reservation was a big adjustment for Maya. The small community was tight-knit, and newcomers were viewed with some suspicion. But David's family welcomed her warmly, impressed by her respect for their culture and her genuine desire to learn. His grandmother, in particular, took Maya under her wing, teaching her traditional recipes and stories that had been passed down through generations. Maya found work at the tribal college, teaching history and helping students with their writing. She loved working with young people who were eager to learn about their heritage. Her academic background combined with her passion for Native American culture made her a natural teacher. It was during this time that Maya discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had always wanted children, but the thought of raising a child while managing her own physical challenges worried her. David was overjoyed, immediately starting to plan how they would modify their small house to accommodate a growing family. When Maya was 6 months pregnant, David proposed officially. This time he had a ring, a simple silver band with a small turquoise stone that had belonged to his grandmother. He got down on one knee in their living room, telling Maya that he wanted to make their commitment official before their child was born. The engagement announcement surprised many people in town. Some couldn't understand what a college-educated woman like Maya saw in a construction worker like David. Others whispered that David was only marrying her because she was pregnant. The cruelest comments suggested that Maya was lucky to find anyone willing to marry a woman with a disability, but Maya and David ignored the gossip. They had found real love, the kind that sees past surface differences to the person underneath. As they planned their simple wedding ceremony, Maya felt nervous about walking down the aisle in front of everyone. Her limp was more pronounced now that she was pregnant, and she knew people would be watching. Little did she know that their wedding day would become a story that would be told for generations, teaching an entire community about the true meaning of strength and dignity. The morning sun streamed through the small window of Maya's bedroom as she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the white dress hanging on her closet door. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but butterflies danced wildly in her stomach. She placed her hand on her rounded belly, feeling the baby kick as if sensing her nervousness. Her mother knocked softly on the door before entering. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked, carrying a cup of herbal tea that David's grandmother had prepared specially for Maya. "Scared," Maya admitted honestly. "Not about marrying David. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. But about walking down that aisle in front of everyone." Her mother sat beside her, taking her hand. "You've never let anyone's opinion stop you before. Remember when you gave that graduation speech? You were terrified then too, but you stood up there and spoke with such strength that you changed how people saw you." Maya nodded, remembering that day, but this felt different. This was more personal, more vulnerable. She would be walking slowly, visibly pregnant, with her limp more pronounced than ever. And she knew that half the people in that room would be watching her with judgment rather than joy. The wedding was set to take place at the community center, the only building in town large enough to hold both families. Maya had wanted something simple and intimate, but David's family was enormous. He had dozens of cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends who all wanted to celebrate with them. Maya's side would be much smaller, just her mother, a few college friends, and some co-workers from the tribal college. As Maya got ready, she could hear cars arriving outside. Through her window, she watched people filing into the community center. She recognized most of David's relatives, but there were also people she didn't know, older men and women dressed in traditional clothing, moving with the dignity that comes with age and respect. Maya's friend Lisa, who had driven down from the university to be her maid of honor, helped her into the wedding dress. It was nothing fancy, a simple white gown that Maya had altered herself to fit her changing body. But as she looked in the mirror, she felt beautiful. The dress hugged her curves in all the right places, and the soft fabric flowed gracefully over her belly. "You look absolutely radiant," Lisa said, adjusting Maya's veil. "David is going to cry when he sees you." Maya smiled, thinking of David. He had been so nervous the night before, barely able to eat dinner. His hands had shaken as he talked about how honored he felt to be marrying someone as special as Maya. His sincerity had melted, her heart all over again. But as they prepared to leave for the ceremony, Maya overheard voices from the community center drifting through the open windows. She couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was clear. People were talking about her, about the wedding, about whether this marriage would really work. "Don't listen to them," her mother whispered, having heard the voices too. "Today is about you and David, that's all that matters." Maya nodded, but the voices had planted seeds of doubt in her mind. As they walked the short distance to the community center, she could feel people's eyes on her. Some looked at her with genuine warmth and happiness, but others seemed to be studying her, evaluating her, whispering behind their hands. Inside the community center, the decorations were simple but beautiful. David's sisters had strung white lights around the room and placed wildflowers from the reservation in mason jars on each table. The aisle was marked with white ribbons tied to folding chairs, leading to a small altar where David waited with the pastor. Maya peeked around the corner and saw David standing there in his best suit, the same one he'd worn to her graduation. His hair was neatly combed, and he kept fidgeting with his tie. When he looked toward the back of the room, searching for her, his face lit up with such pure joy that Maya felt her own nerves settle slightly. The guests were settling into their seats, and Maya could see the clear division in the room. On one side sat David's large extended family, filling row after row with aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends. Maya noticed several elderly people in the front rows, including a distinguished-looking man with long silver braids who carried himself with obvious authority. She had never seen him before, but everyone around him seemed to treat him with deep respect. On the other side sat Maya's much smaller group of supporters. Her mother, Lisa, a few colleagues from the tribal college, and some neighbors who had become friends over the past year. The difference in numbers made Maya feel even more exposed and vulnerable. As the music began and Lisa started her walk down the aisle, Maya heard the whispers begin. They were quiet at first, just a few murmurs, but they seemed to grow louder as people realized the ceremony was about to start. "Poor thing," someone whispered. "She's really showing now." "I can't believe she's actually going through with this," came another voice. "David's a good man, but what's he thinking?" Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She knew people had been talking about her pregnancy and her engagement, but hearing it so clearly on what was supposed to be her special day felt like a punch to the gut. Her mother squeezed her arm. "Remember what David told you last night?" she whispered. "He said you're the strongest, most beautiful woman he's ever known. Hold on to that." Maya took a deep breath and stepped into the doorway. The music swelled, and every head in the room turned to look at her. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they seemed to get louder. Maya's limp was more pronounced now, made worse by the pregnancy and the nervousness that made her muscles tense. She had to lean heavily on her mother's arm for support. "She can barely walk," someone said, not even trying to keep their voice down. "This is so awkward," came another comment. "She should have just had a private ceremony. Look at her struggling. This is painful to watch." Each comment hit Maya like a physical blow. Her steps became even more careful, more hesitant. She felt like everyone in the room was judging her, finding her lacking, wondering what David could possibly see in her, but then she looked up and saw David's face. He was crying, not from embarrassment or regret, but from pure, overwhelming love. His eyes were locked on hers, and in them she saw everything she needed to see. She saw a man who thought she was perfect exactly as she was. She saw someone who loved her not in spite of her differences, but because of who she was as a complete person. Maya straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. These people didn't know her. They didn't know her strength, her intelligence, her kindness. They didn't know about the nights she and David spent talking about their dreams, or how he made her laugh until her sides hurt, or how he held her when she cried about her childhood struggles. Step by step, Maya made her way down the aisle. The whispers continued, but she began to tune them out. She focused on David's face, on the love shining in his eyes, on the future they were about to build together. When she finally reached the altar, David stepped forward and took her hands. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm the luckiest man alive." Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. This was why she was here. This was what mattered. Not the whispers, not the judgment, not the people who couldn't see past her physical appearance to the person she really was. The pastor began the ceremony, but Maya could still hear murmurs from the crowd. Some people were still whispering, still commenting, still making her feel like she was on display rather than celebrating the most important moment of her life. But something was about to happen that would change everything. Something that would turn those whispers into stunned silence and teach an entire room full of people what it really meant to show respect and recognize true strength. Pastor Williams opened his worn Bible and looked out at the gathered crowd with a gentle smile. He had been performing weddings in this small community for over 20 years, and he had learned to read the mood of a room. Today, he could feel the tension thick in the air like the heavy stillness before a thunderstorm. "Dearly beloved," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the community center, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Maya and David in holy matrimony." His words were traditional, comforting, but Maya could still hear the quiet murmurs rippling through the crowd behind her. David squeezed Maya's hands gently, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. It was a small gesture, but it reminded her that she wasn't alone in this moment. Whatever happened, whatever people said or thought, she had David by her side. The pastor continued with the opening remarks, talking about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Maya tried to focus on his words, but she was acutely aware of every sound behind her. Someone coughed loudly. A chair creaked. She heard the rustle of fabric as people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Marriage," Pastor Williams was saying, "is not just about two people finding each other. It's about two souls choosing to walk life's journey together, supporting each other through whatever challenges may come." His eyes met Maya's for a moment, as she saw kindness there. He, at least, understood that this was about love, not appearance. From somewhere in the crowd, Maya heard a woman whisper, "I still can't believe he's going through with this." Another voice responded, "Well, he's too nice to back out now." The words stung, but Maya kept her expression steady. She had learned long ago not to let cruel comments show on her face. David's jaw tightened slightly, and Maya knew he had heard the whispers too. For a moment she worried he might turn around and say something, but he simply looked into her eyes and mouthed, "I love you." His steady presence gave her strength. The pastor moved into the part of the ceremony where he spoke about the couple's journey to this moment. He had spent time with Maya and David during their pre-marriage counseling sessions, and he spoke genuinely about their love story. He talked about how they had found each other, how their different backgrounds had brought them together rather than driving them apart, and how they had built a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. As he spoke, Maya noticed that some of the whispers had quieted. People were actually listening, perhaps hearing for the first time the real story of how she and David had fallen in love. She caught sight of David's grandmother in the front row, nodding approvingly at the pastor's words. The elderly woman had become like a second mother to Maya, and her presence was a source of comfort. Now, Pastor Williams said, Maya and David have chosen to share their own vows with each other. He stepped back slightly, giving them center stage. David went first, pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket. His hands were shaking slightly, and Maya could see how nervous he was. Public speaking had never been easy for him, but he had insisted on writing his own vows. Maya, he began, his voice strong despite his nerves. When I first met you, I thought you were the smartest person I'd ever known. You could talk about history and culture in ways that made me see the world differently. But it wasn't your intelligence that made me fall in love with you. He paused, looking directly into her eyes. It was your heart. It was the way you listened to my grandmother's stories with such respect. It was how you helped kids at the school with their homework without making them feel stupid. It was how you never once made me feel less than because I didn't finish school. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. Behind her, the room had grown quieter. People were leaning forward, actually listening to David's words. You taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, David continued. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be better. Maya, you make me want to be the best man I can be. You make me want to learn new things, to see the world through your eyes, to be worthy of your love. His voice cracked slightly on the next words. I promise to love you not just today, but every day for the rest of my life. I promise to support your dreams, to hold you when you're sad, to celebrate your victories, and to be your partner in raising our child. I promise to love you exactly as you are because you are perfect to me. There wasn't a dry eye in the first. Few rose. Even some of the people who had been whispering seemed moved by David's heartfelt words. Maya was crying openly now, not caring that her makeup might be running. When it was her turn, Maya didn't need to look at any notes. The words came straight from her heart. David, she said, her voice clear and strong. I spent most of my life believing that I would have to prove myself to everyone I met. I thought I would always have to work twice as hard to be seen as half as good. But you saw me, really saw me, from the very first day we met. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You never treated me like I was broken or needed fixing. You never made me feel like I was a burden or a problem to be solved. You just loved me, exactly as I am. Maya's voice grew stronger as she continued. I promise to love you with everything I have. I promise to respect your family, your culture, and your dreams. I promise to build a home with you where our child will grow up knowing that love comes in many forms, and that true strength comes from accepting and celebrating our differences. She looked out at the crowd for a moment, then back at David. I promise to walk beside you through whatever life brings us, even if I have to walk a little slower sometimes. Because I know that you'll always match my pace, and that together we can face anything. The room was completely silent now. Even the harshest critics seemed to have been moved by the raw honesty and love in both sets of vows. Maya felt a surge of pride and confidence. This was her moment, her love story, and she wasn't going to let anyone diminish it. Pastor Williams was about to continue with the ceremony when something unexpected happened. Maya heard a chair scrape against the floor, and she glanced over to see one of the elderly men from David's family standing up. She recognized him as the distinguished-looking man with silver braids, who had been sitting in the front row. The man was tall and lean, with weathered skin that spoke of decades spent outdoors. He wore traditional clothing, a beautiful beaded vest over a white shirt, and his long silver hair was braided with small decorative elements. There was something about the way he carried himself that commanded instant respect. David's eyes widened with surprise and what looked like concern. Maya could see him trying to figure out what his great-uncle was doing. The elderly man began walking slowly toward the altar, his steps deliberate and purposeful. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Maya felt her heart racing, unsure what was happening. Was this man going to object to their marriage? Was he going to say something that would embarrass David's family? As the man approached, Maya noticed that every person in David's family was watching with intense attention. Some looked worried, others curious, but all seemed to recognize the significance of whatever was about to happen. The man's presence seemed to fill the room, transforming the entire atmosphere. Even Pastor Williams stepped back respectfully. Sensing that something important was about to occur, Maya gripped David's hand tighter, drawing strength from his presence. Whatever this man was about to do or say, she would face it with dignity. She had come too far and fought too hard to let anyone intimidate her now. The elderly man reached the altar and looked directly at Maya. His eyes were kind but serious, and Maya felt as though he was looking straight into her soul. In that moment, she realized that everything was about to change, though she had no idea how dramatically this man's next actions would transform not just her wedding day, but the entire community's understanding of what it meant to show true respect. The elderly man approached Maya with a grace that seemed to slow time itself. Every step he took was measured and deliberate, as if he was walking to the rhythm of an ancient drum that only he could hear. The silver threads woven through his braids caught the light from the community center's windows, creating a subtle glow around his weathered face. Maya's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She had no idea who this man was or what he intended to do. All she knew was that David's entire family was watching with expressions that ranged from awe to nervousness. Even the people who had been whispering earlier were now completely silent. Sensing that something significant was about to happen, the man stopped directly in front of Maya, close enough that she could see the deep lines around his eyes and the wisdom that seemed to radiate from his presence. His dark eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her feel like he was reading her entire life story in a single glance. "My name is Joseph Running Bear," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority and respect. "I am David's great-uncle, and I am an elder of our tribe." His words were spoken in English, but there was a cadence to them that suggested he was more comfortable speaking in his native tongue. Maya felt David tense beside her, and she could sense his confusion. This wasn't part of the ceremony they had planned. David had mentioned his great-uncle might attend, but he had never suggested the man would interrupt the proceedings. Joseph reached into a small leather pouch that hung at his side, his movements slow and ceremonial. Maya caught a glimpse of something metallic inside, but she couldn't tell what it was. The entire room seemed to lean forward, trying to see what was happening. "Young woman," Joseph said, his eyes never leaving Maya's face, "I have watched you from a distance for many months. I have heard stories about you from my family. I have seen how you carry yourself, how you treat others, how you honor our ways even though you were not born to them." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea that David's great-uncle had been observing her, evaluating her. The thought should have been intimidating, but there was something in his tone that suggested approval rather than judgment. "In our tradition," Joseph continued, his voice growing stronger, "we believe that a person's true character is revealed not in their moments of ease, but in how they handle difficulty. We honor those who face challenges with dignity and grace." He paused, letting his words sink in. Maya could feel the attention of every person in the room focused on this moment. Even the people who had been whispering cruel comments earlier were now hanging on every word. "This woman," Joseph said, turning slightly to address the crowd while still keeping one hand extended toward Maya, "has shown courage that many warriors would envy. She has walked a difficult path, and she has done so with her head held high." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes, but these were different from the tears she had shed earlier. These weren't tears of hurt or embarrassment. These were tears of recognition, of being truly seen and valued by someone whose opinion clearly mattered deeply to this community. Joseph turned back to Maya, and his weathered face softened into something that might have been a smile. "I have watched you study our history with respect and dedication. I have seen you work with our children, teaching them not just facts from books, but helping them understand the importance of their heritage." He reached into his pouch again, this time pulling out what Maya could now see was a silver bracelet. It was old, clearly handmade, with intricate designs that told a story she couldn't read, but could feel in her heart. "Most importantly," Joseph continued, "I have seen how you love our David, not trying to change him, not trying to make him into something he is not, but loving him for exactly who he is. That is the mark of a true partner. Maya's hands were shaking now, not from nerves, but from the overwhelming emotion of this unexpected recognition. She had spent her entire life feeling like she had to prove herself to everyone she met, and here was this respected elder publicly acknowledging her worth. Joseph looked out at the crowd, his eyes moving from face to face, pausing on those who had been whispering earlier. When he spoke again, his voice carried a subtle but unmistakable challenge. "There are those who look at this woman and see only what makes her different," he said. "They see the way she walks and they think they understand who she is, but they are wrong." The silence in the room was so complete that Maya could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside. People who had been fidgeting in their seats were now completely still, afraid to miss a single word. "I see a woman who has overcome obstacles that would have defeated many others," Joseph continued. "I see someone who has turned her challenges into strength, who has used her experiences to become more compassionate, more understanding, more determined." He lifted the silver bracelet, holding it so that everyone in the room could see it. "This belonged to my grandmother, White Dove. She too was judged for being different. She too faced those who could not see past appearances to the person beneath," Maya gasped softly. She had heard stories about White Dove from David's family. The woman had been a legendary figure in their tribe, known for her wisdom and leadership. During some of their most difficult times, White Dove was born with a withered arm, Joseph explained. In her time, some people said she could never be a true leader because of her disability, but she proved them wrong. She became one of our greatest chiefs, leading our people through times of great hardship with wisdom and courage. He looked directly at Maya, and she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just recognition. It was a connection to something larger than herself, a lineage of strong women who had faced adversity and emerged victorious. "White Dove taught me that true strength comes not from perfection, but from how we carry ourselves through imperfection," Joseph said. "She taught me that the greatest leaders are often those who have faced their own struggles and learned from them." With a ceremonial grace that spoke of decades of tradition, Joseph took Maya's left hand in both of his. His skin was weathered and warm, and Maya could feel the calluses that came from a lifetime of hard work. "Today," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "I see that same strength in you. I see a woman who deserves not judgment, but honor, not whispers, but respect." And then, in a gesture that left the entire room speechless, Joseph bowed his head and gently kissed Maya's hand. It was a sign of respect so profound, so unexpected, that Maya heard several people gasp audibly, but he wasn't finished. With careful, reverent movements, Joseph slipped the silver bracelet onto Maya's wrist. The metal was warm from his touch, and Maya could feel the weight of its history, the stories it carried, the honor it represented. "This bracelet has been worn by strong women in our family for 5 generations, Joseph said. "Today it finds a new home with someone worthy of carrying on that tradition." Maya looked down at the bracelet through her tears, hardly believing what was happening. The intricate silver work caught the light, and she could see tiny symbols worked into the metal, symbols that told the story of women who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. When she looked up, Joseph was smiling at her with genuine warmth. "Welcome to our family, daughter," he said simply. "May you carry this with pride, and may it remind you always that you are valued, you are respected, and you are loved." The transformation in the room was immediate and complete. The whispers that had followed Maya down the aisle were replaced by stunned silence, then by quiet murmurs of approval and respect. People who had been judging her moments before were now looking at her with new eyes, forced to reconsider their assumptions by the public recognition of one of their most respected leaders. The silence that followed Joseph's gesture seemed to stretch forever. Maya stood there, the silver bracelet warm against her wrist, feeling as though the entire world had shifted around her. The weight of what had just happened was almost overwhelming, not just the honor itself, but the way it had transformed the atmosphere in the room. Pastor Williams, who had been standing quietly to the side during Joseph's speech, stepped forward. With tears in his eyes, "I've been performing weddings for 20 years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I've never witnessed anything more beautiful than what just happened here." He looked out at the crowd, then back at Maya and David. Sometimes God works through unexpected moments to teach us important lessons. Today, we've all learned something about the true meaning of strength and dignity. The rest of the ceremony continued, but everything felt different now. When Pastor Williams asked if anyone objected to the marriage, the silence was complete and respectful. When he pronounced Maya and David husband and wife, the applause was genuine and heartfelt. As they kissed for the first time as a married couple, Maya could hear people cheering, not just David's family, but even some of the people who had been whispering earlier, walking back down the aisle as newlyweds. Maya felt like she was floating. Her limp was still there, more pronounced than ever because of the pregnancy, but somehow it didn't matter anymore. She held David's arm proudly, her head held high. The silver bracelet catching the light with every step, people reached out to touch her hand as she passed, offering congratulations and blessings. Mrs. Henderson, who had been one of the harshest whispers earlier, actually stood up and nodded respectfully as Maya walked by. The change in attitude was so dramatic it was almost hard to believe. At the reception, the transformation continued. People who had barely acknowledged Maya before were now approaching her to introduce themselves properly. They asked about her work at the tribal college, her research, her plans for the future. It was as if Joseph's recognition had given them permission to see her as she truly was. David's cousin Rebecca, who had always been polite but distant, came over during dinner. "Maya, I owe you an apology," she said, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I've been judging you based on things that don't matter." "Uncle Joseph helped me see that today," Maya smiled warmly. "We all make assumptions sometimes," she said. "What matters is that we're willing to change our minds when we learn better." Throughout the evening, Maya found herself in conversations she never could have imagined. People shared their own stories of overcoming challenges, of being judged unfairly, of finding strength in unexpected places. Joseph's gesture had done more than honor Maya. It had opened up a space for honest conversation about prejudice, acceptance, and what it really meant to be strong. As the months passed after the wedding, Maya and David settled into married life. Their daughter, Luna, was born 3 months later, a healthy, beautiful baby who seemed to inherit the best qualities of both parents. Maya proved to be a natural mother, adapting to the challenges of caring for a newborn while managing her own physical limitations, but the changes that began on their wedding day extended far beyond their personal lives. The story of Joseph's recognition spread throughout the community, becoming a tale that people told and retold. It became a teaching story, a reminder that strength comes in many forms, and that true worth has nothing to do with appearance. Maya's work at the tribal college flourished. Enrollment increased as more students heard about the teacher who had been honored by Elder Joseph Running Bear. She developed new programs that brought together native and non-native students, fostering understanding and cooperation between different communities. She also started a support group for people with disabilities, both on and off the reservation. The group met monthly, sharing experiences and strategies for dealing with prejudice and discrimination. Maya often told the story of her wedding day, showing how one person's recognition could change everything. The silver bracelet became a symbol of hope for many people. Maya would sometimes let other women try it on, telling them about White Dove and the legacy of strong women who had worn it before her. She explained that strength wasn't about being perfect. It was about facing challenges with dignity and grace. David grew into his role as a husband and father beautifully. He took classes at the tribal college, earning his GED and then enrolling in courses about construction management. Maya's influence had awakened in him a desire to learn that he'd never known he had. He often said that marrying Maya had made him a better man, not because she had changed him, but because she had believed in him. Their marriage became a model for others in the community. They showed that love could bridge any gap between different backgrounds, different education levels, different abilities. Their home became a gathering place where people from all walks of life felt welcome. Joseph, running bear, continued to be a guiding presence in their lives. He often visited, sharing stories about tribal history and teaching Luna traditional songs and dances. He told Maya that giving her the bracelet had been one of the most important decisions of his life, because it had taught the entire community about the power of recognition and respect. Years later, when Luna was old enough to understand, Maya would tell her the story of her parents' wedding day. She would explain how Uncle Joseph had stood up when people were being cruel, how his gesture had changed everything, how one person's courage to do the right thing could transform an entire community. The bracelet isn't just jewelry, Maya would tell her daughter. It's a reminder that we all have the power to lift each other up, to see the best in people, to choose respect over judgment. Luna would listen with wide eyes, touching the bracelet gently. "Will I get to wear it someday?" she would ask. "When you're ready," Maya would say. "When you understand that true strength comes not from being perfect, but from being kind, from standing up for what's right, from seeing the good in others even when it's hard to find." The story of Maya and David's wedding became legend in Cedar Falls and the surrounding reservation. It was told at other weddings, at community gatherings, at schools where children learned about treating others with respect. It became a reminder that love sees beyond surface differences, that strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes it takes just one person's courage to change everything. Maya never forgot the feeling of that silver bracelet sliding onto her wrist, or the way Joseph's recognition had transformed not just her wedding day, but her entire life. She kept that feeling close to her heart, using it as fuel for her work in bringing people together and teaching them to see beyond their differences. And whenever she met someone who was struggling with prejudice or discrimination, someone who felt different or excluded, she would tell them the story of the day when whispers of judgment were silenced by a gesture of respect. She would show them her bracelet and remind them that true strength is always recognized by those who matter most. The legacy of that wedding day lived on, passed down through generations as a reminder that dignity and respect are choices we make every day, and that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply recognize the worth and strength in others, especially when the world seems determined to see only their differences.